Hi everyone, this is Tanya from Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me as I explore another artistic style of Beatrix Potter. And if you have read the title or took a look at the cover page on this, you'll know that it says Impressionism. And yes, Beatrix Potter did some Impressionism art, and that's what we're going to look at in this video. And usually when I start the Beatrix Potter videos, I start with an inking because she did a lot of pen and ink and then watercolor, but you'll notice this is straight pencil. And I am doing a watercolor wash on here. I think I did about 4 washes, and this is my blueberry green tea, so I didn't want it too dark. I kind of wanted a light, almost yellow tint to the paper, and I do that to make it look aged. Just in case you haven't watched these before, I'm going to link it down below so you can see some of the other videos I've done where I have studied Miss Potter's style. So let's take a look at what we're starting with. I have my size 6 round, and this is from the Winsor Newton series. Then I have my Winsor Newton watercolors and 1 cup of water. And the watercolors, you'll notice, are in a different kind of palette. This is not what they came in. This is simply the one I have chosen because it's a lot easier to mix the colors where you can see it on camera. Then I also have a microfiber cloth for wiping my brush, and then my what I like to call my cheat sheet, where I have pre-put all the colors down and mix them so I'll know what we're mixing together. And just in case I forget to tell you what colors we're using, like yellow ochre right now, I will have those on the screen for you, so be taking a look at those. So what I am starting with is the background green color. I'm using a lot of water over in my palette, mixing those together, and I'm using that cheat sheet to make certain I have a color fairly similar to what she has. I have a lot of water on my brush right now. You'll see I'm wiping it off on the microfiber cloth, and that is so I don't have too much water on my brush. We are using 140-pound, 100% cotton cold pressed paper, and if I have too much water on my brush, it's just going to kind of spread out once it gets on the paper. I don't want it to do that. I want to keep it more controlled, so I don't want a lot of water in my brush. The only water I want is what is in the palette where I have pre-mixed the color, because if you have watched any of these videos before, then you know that, and in my opinion, it seems as if Miss Potter used more of a dry brush technique where she didn't have a lot of water on her brush. She used her brush more for drawing sometimes, and that is what she is doing with her Impressionism. She doesn't ink it in. She leaves it in pencil. That's why we have left it in pencil. And I really should have knocked my pencil marks back a little bit more. I knocked them back some, but I should have blotted them a bit more with my kneaded eraser to kind of pull up a little bit more of the pencil, but it's going to work out. It's going to be fine. So what she started with was the lighter green, and she's using that to block in the basic shape, the basic form of the tree. And you'll notice that I am doing what I always describe to my students when you're working on an Impressionism piece. You don't want solid paint strokes. You want more of these dots and dashes, and that's going to help us basically get in the form of the tree and also kind of fill out the outline of those different leaf clumps on the tree. When you're doing a tree that's in the distance, you know it has leaves on it, but you don't want to draw every single leaf. I'm not certain what kind of tree this is, but what I noticed, it was very obvious to me that Miss Potter started with this light green in the background, and then she started to build upon that. She started to layer. So we're going to have to let this layer dry before we add any more on top. But she progressively got darker with her colors. And as she got darker with the colors, she had, you could see more of a definition of the leaves that were coming toward us, so you could make out that there was a leaf shape, but she didn't draw actual leaves. When you're working with Impressionism and you're working plein air, which is what she obviously did on this, she's outside painting, you have movement of the trees, you have movement of light, and you have to work fairly quickly. Now, it looks like I'm working quickly here, but honestly, I speeded this up several times faster than what I actually paint because I have the luxury of looking at what she has already done. I'm not having to paint that myself. So she would have moved very quickly, and I think that's very smart to use a light color and to block in all of the shape, and then to come back and build on that once it's dry and get the exact form of the clumps of leaves, and it helps you to get the shadows in. So, you know, this is sort of one of those rules that I break quite often when I'm doing watercolor. You want to put your light colors down first and then build on it with the dark colors, because you can't really paint light on dark. Sometimes you can. It depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it. But most generally, artists will tell you to put the light color down first on watercolor and then build on top of that. So I'm going to continue to put all of the shapes in for our good base, so we'll get the entire shape of the tree down. And you'll notice I haven't done the branches yet. I've saved those. That's because I'm going to sandwich them in between this background and the leaves we're going to put on top. So I don't want them to be right on top of everything. I want them to kind of move through, because that's what we see when we look at a tree. It kind of moves through. So now we're going to work on the bark. And when I was doing trees with kids, when I was teaching painting trees with kids, kids always want to paint the tree green. And in this case, it is green, but sometimes it's not always green. And then they want to paint the bark brown. And I'm like, tree bark is not necessarily brown. Sometimes it's gray. And they would argue with me. And we were very blessed that I had a couple of different studios, and we always had trees outside the studio. So I would get all the kids together. We would line up kindergartners, first graders, whatever. We'd go outside and I'd say, we're going to go look at trees. We would go look at the trees, and I would say, what color is the bark? And they would say gray. And I would say, excellent, let's go back in. So I am starting with a brown base, but you notice I added Payne's gray, and that gives me a nice kind of a gray-brown color. And that's what we're going to use for our tree. Now, she does have some brown on the tree. And again, there are some trees that have brown on the bark, but most generally they will have kind of a gray base. So we're going to keep working on this, and I'm going to use the tip of my brush to get all of those little branches in. Going to get off for a second, hop back on when we start painting those leaves, and we'll talk again. All right, we are ready to start with the leaves that are coming toward us. Now, for that base coat of the leaves, remember I started with that yellow ochre and I added the permanent sap green, but I am now using the same yellow ochre and I am trying out the Windsor blue, but I want to make certain this is the right shade. So you're going to see me going back and forth on these because like I said, I'm going to be testing these, and normally I have a little testing sheet in front of me, but I failed to pick that up and I didn't want to rummage through my drawer and mess up the whole camera situation. So I'm just going to be using the back of my cheat sheet where I have swatched all the colors. Here we go. There it is. And I want you to see what it is as well. So it was more of a blue-green and it tended more toward blue than green, but it's gonna work some magic on top of the green we already have down. So here we go. We're going to start again with these little, I had a little bit of pink on there, but it's not gonna, I really don't know where that came from. It may have been some crayon, but you can see I'm using the dots and dashes. It is extremely blue, almost a blue-gray actually, I should say, over there in the palette. And when I put it on top of the green that we already have down, it turns it into almost a forest green. So this was wonderful. And then when it works just on the plain paper, I noticed this on her piece, she had some more of like blues outside of the green that was on there. They kind of went outside of the green and created a whole different shade of leaf. So that added some more interest to her piece. And again, I'm using the dots and dashes. Now, one thing you're going to see me do, if you haven't already noticed, is I will be switching back and forth between my left and my right hand. I can paint with my left or my right hand. I can draw with my left or my right hand. I prefer to write with just my right hand. I don't know why that is. I discovered in college when I had wrist surgery during a break that when I came back, it was supposed to be healed, but it took longer to heal. I couldn't do my studio classes with my right hand. So my professor's like, just do it with your left hand. So I thought, oh, I'm going to fail this class. I found out I could actually draw as well with my left hand as I could my right, and it comes in handy if I'm having arthritis pain, or in this case, when I need to paint leaves that are going the other direction. For some reason, I just could not do it with my right hand, so I just switched over to my left, and it worked much better. So if you see me on the left side of the tree working, many times I'm using my right hand, and as you can see right here, I'm having to switch over because these leaves were pointed the other direction and I couldn't paint that with my right hand. I also was a bank teller. That's how I put myself through school, was working at a bank. I was a bank teller and I could not count money with my right hand to save my soul. I had to count it with my left hand only. So something a little weird about me, but I'm going to keep doing these little dots and dashes, and you can see I'm traveling over the top of those branches like I said I was going to do. I'm going to sandwich them in between, and that's going to give us some depth in our piece, and that's what Miss Potter did in her piece. So we are going to keep working along, and if I didn't say it earlier, I did get my reference photo from the Victoria and Albert Museum website, and I'll link that down below so that you can take a look at all the reference photos there. She had quite a few of Impressionism pieces, so I'm going to be doing some that are combination Impressionism and also her inking with it, and then I'm going to do some more just of her Impressionism pieces because I just love her art. So I'm going to hop off again and I'll hop back on in a few minutes. Before I start any of these pieces of Miss Potter's or any other artist pieces, when I am trying to learn their technique, I will look at the piece and study it and think about the colors. But something I didn't do before I did this piece for you was plan out the colors. So you are seeing me plan these colors out as it is happening. And you saw there, I thought, there's a little bit of a green in here. It's a brighter green. So I think I will see what happens if I take some of that permanent sap green and put it on top of the green I made previously. But it wasn't that bright green that I needed. So I added a little bit of that Windsor blue, and that brought it out to the brighter green that we needed for that area. But I do recommend, if you are studying an artist and you want to get these colors down before you start your quote a masterpiece, I'm doing air quotes that you can't see, you really need to plan these colors out ahead of time. But I wanted you to see me do it in real time. And I do take small pieces of paper. Artists save everything. So when I have to make a smaller piece of paper, I keep all the little trim pieces, and I will use those and make colors ahead of time to sort of decide what I want to use and plan everything out, sort of like a roadmap. And I will make little written notes on there and just plan it all out ahead of time. But I did have my cheat sheet on this one, so I thought I could pick up most of the colors on there. I knew there were going to be a couple that I couldn't do, and I thought it would be good for you to see how I figured that out in the process. We have reached the final color we have to mix for this piece. And I'm going to start with a little bit of burnt sienna and add some blue to it. I don't want black to add shadows. If you're doing Impressionism, you want to stay away from black. So I'm using a little Windsor blue because I know that's going to give me a nice dark color. And I'm going to go back and forth here to try to get a good dark color. It's going to go on top of these layers that are already dried. Now you don't see the drying time in here, but I did try to work around on this piece so that, and there we go. It's a little bit darker than the one before. And yep, a little bit darker, so that's what we wanted. And I want to let areas dry before I come back to them, so you'll see me work around the piece, but there is some drying time in there. Plus I'm working in front of a window, and I have it open, so the air is coming in, helping that to dry fairly quickly. I did that on purpose, but you'll see that magic when you add it on top. It turns almost black, and that's what we needed for the shadows. So these are the final touches that we're putting on here, and I really enjoyed this piece. I'm looking forward to doing some more pieces like this. It was very relaxing. All in all, I think it took me maybe an hour to do this piece, because if you watch my videos, you know I say I'm a very slow painter. I am. And having the window open made the stuff dry a little bit faster, so it gave me the feel she would have had if that had been a windy day and you have the air moving around you. It lets your painting dry a bit faster. But you can see this really helps me to get those tiny little shapes of leaves. So start with a base color, slowly go darker, and as you get to those darker shades, you're going to get all of the detail. Thank you so much for joining me and going through this process with me. This was, like I said, this was a fun one. I'm looking forward to doing more. I hope you will join me in this study. If you do, let me know in the comments below. If you have a suggestion or a piece of Miss Potter's you'd like for me to try, let me know that as well, because there are so many, it's hard for me to choose sometimes. So thank you again for joining me. I will have some more of her work. I will be translating this into my own reference photos, so be looking for those. I'm doing those on postcards, and this is a postcard size, so I will have this in the playlist for my postcards as well, and I'll link both of those down below in case you've not watched my videos or you want to get caught up on them. I'll have those linked down below, but I hope you'll join me for those, and until then, I will see you in the next one.